I'll just wait for everyone to get seated. Yeah, that was an amazing talk, Einar. I really enjoyed that. And I am going to continue a little bit in the same theme, although also slightly different. My talk is about creativity in the age of AI as well. I'll briefly introduce myself so you can find me later. If you want to talk about any of this, I work on web standards for the Dutch government, including WCAG and WCAG PM. And EN 301549 is one of the standards I learned to pronounce really quickly. It's about accessibility. I'm also in the W3C's advisory board, the World Wide Web Consortium, where we think about subjects such as AI. I'm a blogger at Hidde de Vries. You can find me there. And I'm here in personal capacity, just like Einar said. None of my opinions are the opinions of the W3C or of the Dutch government, right? But we may have some in common. I live in a city called Rotterdam. We are also a harbor city like Stavanger. We have lots of oil industry too, although I don't know if it's as many. Yeah, that's about it for myself. And I wanted to share that I love computers. I'm talking about computers in my talk, and you might get the impression that I don't like them. I do love computers. But the point that I want to make today is that we tend to overestimate the power that computers have. And that could be the thing because we're in this industry, we're in the IT industry, and you know, this is what we earn our money with. But we really tend to overestimate the power of computers and also the progress that we're making with technology. A man whose hubris needs no introduction, Elon Musk. He said years ago that it would take him 3 to 4 years to complete a Hyperloop system between 2 American cities. And in the interview, he said if it was his top priority, he could probably get it done in 1 or 2 years. Never happened. This thing didn't get built. Yeah, it's not there. It's just one example. Bill Gates said he would end spam in 2 years with a magical solution based on the concept of proof. Never happened. We still have spam. I received some spam just a few minutes ago. And do you remember the time where we said NFTs were the future of creative expression? Today, it turns out when AWS is down, your art is also down. They hosted the Bored Ape Yacht Clubs, all your apes, on AWS. And this thing that they said would be amazingly consistent and always available, etc., you own the thing. It's not there anymore. We tend to overestimate computers, and that would be one thing on its own, but we do that while we underestimate creative work. And that hurts me because creativity is amazing, as I will share in this talk. Mark Zuckerberg, who's just mentioned before, he said in an interview when he was asked why do you steal creative works from people? He said, I think creators tend to overestimate the value of their specific content in the grand scheme of things. I think that's a dull statement. I think he misunderstands what creators do and what creativity actually is. Sam Altman of OpenAI said just 2 years ago that creativity has been easier for AI than people thought, as if creativity has now been solved by AI. And when I heard that, I was like, well, what does he actually mean by that? What is actually easier than people thought? And he goes on to say, you can see DALL-E generate amazing images, write creative stories with GPT-4. And clearly, in this interview, he's pitching his own company. And that's cool. Like, people can, like, I'm not against capitalism, right? People can pitch their own companies and earn money, earn shitloads of money. That's all fine by me, but we have to see these statements for what they are. He's not actually looking at creativity, he's looking at ways to make lots of money. That's what he means when he talks about creativity. And yeah, man in the middle, right? So I want to start by talking about computing, and I'll get back to creativity after. Because the thing about computing is that it goes back a really long time. Computing in its original form was about manipulating numbers. And we've done that for literal millennia. 2,000 years before Christ, in present-day Iraq, Babylonia, we had clay tablets they used, and we found them later, that resemble pie charts. We found others that resemble Excel sheets. They didn't do the exact same thing, right? But they were used for trade, if I understand correctly. So computing was always about manipulating numbers. At some point, it actually used to be a job. Like someone was a computer, and that meant that they would do the calculations. Computing has increasingly become about manipulating data, about completing tasks automatically. And I think it's kind of throwing technology at something. That is what computing means these days. Now, one of the first people to come up with, at least conceptually, a computer was Charles Babbage in the 19th century, a mathematician, and he made these machines to try and do equations automatically. And he didn't actually make them, he just kind of dreamt them up and he wrote them in this essay. Later people have built, based on his essays, have built actual machines. But he was the first kind of person to come up with an idea of, could we potentially automate? And of course there was a lot of business value in that to be found, because people were trading and it could make trade a lot easier. A friend of his at the time was Ada Lovelace. She is today credited with the person who came up with the first algorithm. But she was a good friend of Charles Babbage and studied the machines that he came up with. And then explained them to a wider audience and kind of described how it would work. In a way, she was kind of the OG developer relations person. She explained all these ideas, and she also wrote some notes about them. One thing she said that I thought was really interesting is it's desirable to guard against the possibility of exaggerated ideas that might arise as to the powers of the analytical engine. She's warning us here. We could be exaggerating these ideas. And if we look back at the history of computing, there's a lot of exaggeration happening in our industry. Going through the history of computer science, of course, we do need to mention Alan Turing. He kind of started a lot of computer science with a 1937 paper on the decision problem, or the Entscheidungsproblem, which was the most general problem of mathematics. The idea was to write one algorithm to detect if any mathematical statement is true or false. Something that you could ask ChatGPT today, maybe. You could try. But that was a groundbreaking thing. And in this paper, he showed that there's actually no way that we could have a universal machine or an algorithm that can decide on all of mathematics. It's really interesting. It's also really complex. Like for this talk, I tried to read the thing again, and I read it in my university days, and it is quite tricky. There's a book called Turing's Vision that goes into a lot of the details I can recommend. Or there's the film as well, The Imitation Game, that kind of does a Hollywood version of it, but it explains some of it too. Then in the history of artificial intelligence, one groundbreaking moment was in 1956 when an assistant professor named John McCarthy at Dartmouth College, he's the guy who later invented the functional programming language Lisp. He decided to hold a workshop in Dartmouth with a couple of his friends. And the workshop would be about this new field, artificial intelligence. And what's interesting about this is the first appearance of the word artificial intelligence. And he later admitted he used these words, both the word artificial and the word intelligence, to kind of get people excited in the subject. It was basically a way to market the event. And it's kind of still used for marketing. It was really interesting that time. They wrote down 7 things that they would solve over one summer. One of them was creativity, interestingly, the last one. But also, they obviously didn't do that. We didn't have artificial intelligence yet in 1957, like a year after that. He admitted that later. AI was actually harder than we thought. So it's a long timeline. We had the first algorithm invented in the 19th century. We had concepts like the Turing machine that were hugely influential. We had people like Grace Hopper invent compilers and the first programming language. We had the first software engineer on Apollo missions, Margaret Hamilton. She was the first person to say, my job is software engineer. She's cool. She invented that word. Later, we got interesting robots, like the first robotic vacuum cleaner that proved very useful in households. And we had things like the invention of the iPhone in 2007. I still think that is a pivotal moment in computer science or in like the history of computing, because it meant that we now had computers in our pockets, and we use them all the time in ways that we could never have imagined before. Now it's 2025, and we've kind of reached the age of AI will fix all of our problems. Or as Einar said, AI changes everything. But we need to be careful because of that possibility of exaggerated ideas. We really need to be careful. And that brings me to creativity and arts. I think creativity is really interesting. It is basically problem solving. And at this conference, we've seen a lot of different talks, and there will be some more tomorrow that are basically about problem solving. There are talks about old school hacking, about sunsetting products, about election security, and about looking beyond the AI hype, as we've seen this morning and just now. But creativity, one of the most kind of interesting forms of creativity for me is the absence of dullness. If I see something creative, I see something that's interesting, that's fun to look at, that's fun to interact with. Here's a video of a Dutch hip-hop group called De Jeugd van Tegenwoordig, who made a song called Manon, which basically has as its chorus, I'm in love with every letter of your name. And they made this kind of cat playground with these letters. I think it's really cool. If you hear the song, you can also feel the beat that kind of goes in sync with the cat moving up and down. The kind of thing you get when you do this is all based on choices. Like, they make really interesting choices. That is what creativity is all about, that you make interesting choices. If we look at philosophy, they've said a lot about creativity and about what art is. And Immanuel Kant, one of the most famous philosophers, I want to say, said that creativity is basically the ability to produce works that are not only original, that can be original nonsense, but they're also exemplary. Margaret Bowden, who recently passed away, sadly, was a professor in artificial intelligence and creativity. Wrote some amazing books on that subject. She defines 3 different types of creativity: combinational, exploratory, and transformational. So these are the things you want to be looking for when you're looking for creativity. I'll give some examples. Combinational. Have you ever tried espresso tonic? Can I see hands if anyone's had that? Yeah. This is a weird combination. If you don't have your hand up, you might think, well, this doesn't make any sense. But if you've worked with me for over a few months, then I've usually introduced you to the drink, and I've converted some people in my days. Combinational creativity. There's also exploratory creativity, which is basically what happens when you put a bunch of jazz musicians on a stage. They will play songs that they've played before, but they will also play around with one another and kind of explore new horizons while they're kind of working. This was Herbie Hancock that I got to see in Toronto last year. And there's transformational creativity. People say AI is an example of an invention that's like that, but I'll play safe and say the steam engine was one of those. Or the work of Quincy Jones, who produced records like those of Michael Jackson and went into a whole new kind of directions with his art. Now, creativity is somewhat similar to art and design and aesthetics, so I want to kind of disambiguate those a little bit. Creativity is basically about the question, is this new or interesting? Whereas design is about, does this function well? Aesthetics is about, is this beautiful? And art, yeah, what makes it art? Art is a little bit more complex, and I'll get into that, what makes art complex and different. I do think it's the most interesting form of creativity. So creativity used in practice could be seen as art. Now, the one thing that's a little weird about art is that people are sometimes quite protective about what counts as art. Some people say it's definitely not entertainment. Like, if it's entertainment, it cannot possibly count as art. But I want to have a really wide version of this definition. I think almost everything is art, or there is art in almost everything. I want to include films, books, paintings, poetry, photography, music, sculpture, performances, plays, operas, street art, comedy, literature, video games, Some of your posts on social media, like a lot of that is art. There is art in there some way. Now, art is not always easy to recognize. I read in the newspaper a while ago that someone had accidentally thrown away a work of art that was in this elevator in a Dutch museum. It looked like this. It was called All the Good Times We Spent Together, a work from 2016, and it was basically a can that they had painted over for it to look like a can of beer. I don't know what the idea behind it was. I did read in the press release that with this work of art, they wanted to inspire people's ways of looking. Yeah, a cleaner threw it in the bin, unfortunately. There's other art, like this work called The Fountain by Marcel Duchamp. He basically purchased a porcelain urinal and signed it with a name, R. Mutt, which wasn't his own name. And then he submitted it to the Society of Independent Artists in New York. And it became tremendously famous. It is just a urinal, but he decided it's going to be art now. And then it became art. Well, there's this interesting object. It's called the peanut butter platform. It's basically a square shape in a museum that they spread peanut butter on. And the artist has a whole manual for how thick to spread it, how much time to take, and all those kind of things. It was bought by a museum in Rotterdam, where I'm based. And what they actually bought is not this floor, because it doesn't survive for a long time because it would get all moldy. It is the instructions on how to apply the peanut butter. And yeah, the artist doesn't even apply it himself. The instructions are followed by people. Another thing that's interesting about art is that it's legitimized. And that happens in different kinds of ways. It can happen by the artist itself. They can put it out as art and say, this is now art. It can also be because the audience decides, we want to pay for this. Or it could be because institutions, like famous museums, say they want to display it. And all these kinds of things can contribute to the legitimization of art. Art also has critics. They can say things like, whoa, this was really well executed, or it has really great ideas or concepts. It was captivating, original, creative. It was full of cliches, or it was stunning. They can write all these kinds of things, and that also makes art art, that there's a whole kind of field of critics in newspapers and other places that will tell us, just the regular people, to know what to think about these different bits of art. Something else that's interesting about art is that it's appreciated conditionally. So there's a difference in how people appreciate different types of art, and it depends on who you are as a person, the languages you speak, all these kinds of things. As a 12-year-old, I loved pop music, and I grew up kind of listening to pop music, but I didn't always understand the lyrics. I loved the song by the Bloodhound Gang called The Bad Touch. My English was very minimal, but it talked about you and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals. And then they sung, let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. And I had no idea what that meant. But I enjoyed the beats in this music. Point I'm trying to make is, I enjoyed the beats, but other people may have enjoyed the lyrics, not me, because I didn't understand English at the time. So appreciating art can depend on your personal experiences, about your knowledge of how this work of art fits in the context of art history. It can be the knowledge that you have of the artist. You might know a lot about them. It can be the description that's in the museum, or like someone tells you stuff about it, or other prerequisites like language. Appreciation really is a continuum. Like, you could have no context and still experience art. You could read the artist's biography and be kind of in the know about stuff. You could have gone through a similar struggle. Or maybe you are an art historian specialized in a specific genre, and then you can really enjoy this bit of art in a different way. In my hometown, there's a film festival called the Noordelijk Film Festival, which specializes in films that are from the north. And I think their assumption is, this is the north of the Netherlands, but you get a lot of films from Scandinavia there too. And I think their assumption is that Northerners have a specific way of being in life that is different from people from the south. So you get a lot of Scandinavian films, Norwegian films too, that are displayed in this film festival. And I think there's something about appreciating that if you are also from the north, then you may have a different experience there than when you're from the south. art is repeated as well. It's repeated all the time. There is this book called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl that was turned into a movie. And then it was turned into another movie. And then it was turned into a musical. And then it was turned into another musical in a different language. This kind of stuff happens all the time. It's still the same work of art, like the same characters are in there, the same kind of moral stories maybe are in there too. But they do it completely differently. I went to the Dutch version last year with my daughter, and the songs were written by a comedian that I really liked, and I thought there were some really good jokes in there that weren't there originally. But yeah, they're all kind of different versions of the same thing. And that kind of thing happens all the time. This makes art really hard to grasp. They're imitations, and they're not imitations in the way that an AI system can imitate. They are imitations where someone puts a lot of effort and thought into different ways to interpret the same thing. The same happens with operas. They get rewritten, they get reinterpreted, they get performed all the time, and that's a process where the writer and the director, the actors, they're all putting in their own perspectives, whether they do that on purpose or not. It happens in music as well. There's a song called SOS by ABBA, and that has been covered a bunch of times. It was also covered by a British band named Portishead, and this cover is dark. It's part of the soundtrack of a film called High Rise. That is a dystopian film about social inequalities and class struggles, lots of violence. So this version is very dark, very daunting, unsettling. It's not a lot of fun to listen to, but it's also in a way kind of beautiful. So yeah, this is the same song, it's completely reinterpreted. Again, it's all about choices. It's about choices that people make when they're making the art that makes the art interesting. Now, art gets repeated in interesting ways. Many of you will be familiar with this painting by David Hockney, Portrait of an Artist. And I thought it was cool when my daughter's art class decided we're going to reinterpret this work of art. So they had 10 kids take this concept and then draw their own version of David Hockney's work. And it was kind of cool to see. They all draw their little swimming pools and they put people in there, but they also did it kind of in different ways. Here's all of them painting. They've got slightly different versions, but there's also a red kind of thread going through the different works of art. You can see they are made in the same way, but they're also quite different. They put their own emotions in, I guess, even at that age. So art gets repeated. Art gets repeated all the time. Just like this event, it gets repeated every year. You get different speakers, you get the same vibe. It gets repeated all the time. Another thing that's interesting about art is that it could contain intentions of people that are making the art. Not always, right? But often that happens. And you don't always know about this either. Like when you read a book or when you listen to some music, you don't always know what the artist has gone through. You could guess, or you could attend like a talk with the artist and then hear all about what they meant or what they wanted to say with their art. And sometimes you just don't know. I found this on Instagram. Here's someone that put their 3-year-old on Instagram that is painting. No way they could have intentions that they've put into this because you don't have those at that age, I don't think. But still, this person, again, is making choices, even if they're only 3 years old. So art is fuzzy. Art is hard to define, and it's also really hard to grasp. Because once you've grasped like one work of art, someone reinterprets it, and it's still the same work, but also different. It gets appreciated differently, so it depends on how you take in the art as an audience. Critics are interesting, and kind of how it gets legitimized too. Now, art is really important, I think. So I want to talk a little bit about what art can do with us in our lives. Art can do a lot of things. Art can make us think. Like it can make artists think. Some artists, they process their lives through their art. I saw an artist named Little Sims this year, and she made an album about something that happened to her. She was in a conflict with one of her collaborators, and it became kind of a messy lawsuit, but also a bit of separation. And she turned this into an album that was partially about that, but also was a bigger kind of story that you could apply to many other situations and many other kind of different separations and what happens after a separation. I also thought this was interesting. Frida Kahlo is an artist who has a German father and a Mexican mother. And then she made this work, Las Dos Fridas, in the year that she got divorced. So this could refer to her struggle with double heritage. It could be something about her ex-husband, or maybe a little bit of both. And it's interesting because these are kind of difficult things to talk about. She may not have been able to talk about it one-to-one with her friends, but like she could put it into art. And art is a thing that can capture those kind of feelings. It can also make the audience think. It can show us futures that we should not want. In some cases, they get it reinterpreted as something that people do want, like George Orwell's 1984. There are governments that actually take that as a manual. But it's interesting, like it captures something, at least to talk about. Art can also capture the political zeitgeist. I saw the film One Battle After Another, Paul Thomas Anderson's latest film, and it does that really beautifully. It is fantastic. Art can also show us what's wrong in reality. Like the band Massive Attack. They do these performances where they are playing on stage, and then behind them you can see numbers that they are worried about, like soldiers that get killed in conflict and stuff like that. Art can also show us a mirror to reflect on stuff. One example of that is a play that was playing in the Netherlands called the Shell case. So Shell is an oil company, and they were attacked by climate activists for obvious reasons. And in this play, they had 5 different people that were speaking about this kind of conflict. And there were monologues from different perspectives. And it was really interesting because the CEO of Shell obviously thinks about these issues in a very different way than a climate activist. And there were other people kind of in between them too that had other ways of looking at it. And it's only through these kinds of art that we can actually understand the problem better. And it can bring us together in a way as well, rather than separate us. Or this work by Banksy. He painted the British Parliament, but then made everyone look like monkeys. It says something about what he thinks about the world, and it puts the world in perspective. Another example of that is the Chinese artist Ai Weiwei, or Ai Weiwei. He wrapped 14,000 discarded life vests that he got from Lesbos, where refugees were arriving. And he put them at the concert house in Berlin. And it makes it very visible how people arrived, but also how many of them arrived, and makes you think about this. It makes the scale of the disaster very visual. Art can do more. Art can move us as well. Like Paul McCartney singing Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. It can move you when you've just been in trouble. Or heartache. Adele singing Someone Like You. If you've just gone through heartache, you can experience that very deeply. Ai Weiwei also made a piece about his imprisonment, where you can look inside of a kind of container where he made a miniature version of his imprisonment. So you can actually experience how claustrophobic it must have been. This is a system that is designed for control. It removes humans from their humanity, and you kind of get to experience that when you look at that art. There are some people in Toronto at the Art Gallery of Toronto that went and measured how much art actually moves people. So they gave people a heart monitor, they let them walk through the museum, and then when they had looked at paintings, afterwards they gave them a rundown of the BPM, so how fast does your heart race when you've looked at this specific art. And I think what's interesting is that number will be different for all of the different people. If the art is about heartache and you've never experienced that, maybe your heartbeat will be fine. If you've just gone through it, maybe it will not. Really interesting experiment. Art can also take a stance. Here is a woman taking a selfie of a boat full of refugees just down the road from here. I took that this morning. Art can also show solidarity. There's a group called Led by Donkeys in London in the UK, and they took some paint to the road. There was some yellow paint and there was some blue paint. And basically what they did is they threw the paint onto the road. They knew a lot of cars would be driving there. And basically they then allowed all the cars to drive over the road, creating a huge Ukrainian flag. And they did this right in front of the Russian embassy. So art can be used to show solidarity. This was on a year after the Russian invasion. Art can also support a movement. That has happened many times in the past. Like Marvin Gaye's song, What's Going On, supported the anti-Vietnam War protest at the time. There's a song called All Right by Kendrick Lamar, which was named as a symbol of hope. It was used by Black Lives Matter protesters in the US who were chanting this song all the way throughout their protests. And the artist can use that too. Like Kendrick Lamar later then performed on a police car with an American flag and explained that that was a performance piece. He was using his music to express himself and to make that point. Art can also be used by other people than the artists. Here is Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers. That is at the National Portrait Gallery in London. And a few climate activists went there and threw a can of soup onto the painting. This kind of takes the work of art and uses it for social issues too. Now, art can also capture complex human experiences, like what it is like to be loved or to love. Like the British band Oasis did in Wonderwall. I don't believe that anyone feels the way I do about you now. Or the Backstreet Boys, You're My Fire, the one I desire. And this can kind of capture people's feelings, if you like it or not. It can capture what it's like to try and understand other people. In the book The Vegetarian by the South Korean writer Han Kang, it just won the Nobel Prize for literature. It's about someone who stops eating meat, and it's not really about the vegetarianism as much. But then she starts some kind of disassociated from the people around her and a distance between herself and a kind of society because people didn't really understand what this decision was all about. It also turns really violent, but sure. You could use art to show what it's like to be fed up with the status quo. There's another Dutch hip-hop act that came out with a song where they kept using the word gezellig, which I think translates to a Norwegian word, hygelig. I don't know how to pronounce it. But they use this to protest the immigration stance of the Dutch government and normalization of anti-immigrant rhetoric and politics and all of that. Sally Rooney writes beautiful books about what it's like to be young. So all of these things, they are hard to say to someone face to face, and they are easier to put inside of art and then be interpreted that way. Art can also record collective memories, like Picasso did in his painting Guernica. It has been called the most moving and powerful anti-war painting in art history. Features a dead baby, just like what we saw before, dismembered soldier and flames. And this is about the city of Guernica that was bombed that year for about 2 hours, and it killed a lot of people. A copy of this is hanging at the Security Council at the United Nations headquarters in New York. So it does a lot. There's a place in Berlin where, during the Second World War, a Nazi student union burned over 30,000 books. And today you can go there and see this work of art, which is an empty library, to commemorate this history. It captures the history in a way that makes it very visible and makes the impact very visible. Now, something that's also interesting about art is it does not have to fit in. Just like some systems today are built for fitting in, like LinkedIn is. It will recommend you how to reply to someone on LinkedIn. And it makes us all sound exactly the same. This is the kind of AI that may not be so creative. Oliver Reichenstein explained that in a piece called AI and the End of Writing. He says AI is so good at simulating school and business language because a lot of our own understanding of that is largely simulated. We are trying to look like one another in these kind of worlds, and AI is good for that. One thing that art can also do is insult the audience, like In London, Damien Hirst did that. He let a lot of butterflies into a room and then had glue on the walls. So a lot of those butterflies died, and you could look in the room to see what the situation was at any given time. It was weird and also insulting. People protested this quite a lot. And lastly, mistakes in art can also be very beautiful. So it's not about being perfect, it's about a lot of other things, and mistakes can actually help. So art can do a lot of things. It can make us think, it can move us, it can take a stance, it can support a movement, it can capture a lot of these kind of complex human experiences, and it can record collective memories. So art is pretty amazing. It doesn't do all of these things all the time, right? There's also shitty art that might not do any of it. A lot of this is optional. A lot of the time, you get only a few of those. Sometimes it makes you think, sometimes it has collected a collective memory, and sometimes it's done very little. Now, the point isn't always the art itself. A lot of things go into the art, as I explained, like the artist's intentions, the way they look at the world, their research that they've done, maybe their skills, the way that they look at the world. All of those things, they go into the art. Their own voice, their own life experience, talents, their background, their culture, all goes into art when people are making art. And at the same time, the art also does stuff to the world. So the audience has a shared experience. You go to a pop concert, you're all standing there enjoying the same music. That does something to you. You walk around in the same museum. Pop music is a promise that you aren't listening alone, said Matt Dryhurst. So art does something. It causes emotions, reflections, empathy, understanding, inspiration. So all of these things are caused by art in human beings. And that makes me think, to use a kind of overused metaphor, that the artwork itself is probably the tip of the iceberg. What you don't see is all of that other stuff before making and after releasing. So all of those intentions, the reflections, the worldviews, all of those things, they don't show up in the work of art. So when you press a button in an LLM and you generate some image or you generate a piece of text, you haven't put in any of those reflections. None of your worldviews are reflected. Maybe Sam Altman's worldview is reflected, sure, or Elon Musk's, because sometimes they build these systems to try and reflect their own worldviews. But it isn't the same as you putting love into your own art. The artwork itself is basically what matters. So the first urinal was a big thing, but if you create 4 more, that isn't actually so interesting. It was about that first act of making that thing, like going and buying the urinal in this case. Meaning is often between the lines, and I don't think computers can have intentions or reflections or do research in a meaningful way like artists do. They can be part of a toolset, though, to make artifacts. That happens a lot, and I think to conclude, kind of, that is what I want to say about a lot of these tools, is that they are just a tool. That is really important to realize. As Mira Murati, then the CTO of OpenAI, said when she was asked if LLMs would produce creative works. So they're just tools. And even then, there are lots of open questions for computing. We've already heard about many of them just before, but I'll share a few. One is environmental impact. So all of the major AI companies are currently buying nuclear power plants, all of the major ones, because they cannot find energy in other places. There is grand-scale copyright infringement going on, to the point that OpenAI actually said this to the House of Lords in the UK. They said, we cannot run our company if we don't steal all of this art. And I don't know if this was a campaign here in Norway, but there was a time where the anti-piracy people said, you wouldn't download a movie. And they would say, you know, don't do that, don't use torrents, don't use the Pirate Bay. But this is exactly what these companies are doing now. They're doing it at scale, and they're benefiting from it with huge profits. And we were, at the time, we were just using it for our own entertainment. AI is also a huge factor for abuse. There are lots of stories now about people creating porn with people's faces inside of it that they didn't give permission for. People are creating videos of people who are no longer alive, and even when asked to stop, they still continue. AI is not open. despite what some of the company names say. And there's this major risk of dullness. To me, that is one of the most important ones, especially for the purposes of this talk. Like, all of these things are bad, but also it's just really dull. I don't think creativity can be computed. So I don't want to say if I am against or for AI. That would be an idiot question. But I think it's important to realize that art is as much about the artist and about the audience than it is about all of these deliverables. Art is much more than an artifact. And if we think that our systems can just create stuff, creative works are solved by AI, then we must go back to Ada Lovelace and realize that this possibility of exaggerated ideas is real. We may be exaggerating. Art is a lot more messy than people like Mark Zuckerberg and Sam Altman want to make us believe. We can use computers to express ourselves creatively, but making a creative work is all about process, about intentions, about creativity. It's not about the outputs or about the tools. So I really love computers, but they don't use creativity in the way that artists can. So I want to leave you with 2 takeaways. The first one is make art. And you can do that in lots of different ways. Like, you don't have to become a painter. You can, like, write stuff, join a band. I've joined a choir last year. That is a lot of fun, making music together. Just make art in lots of different ways. And then my second takeaway is enjoy art, because it gives you lots of benefits. It can help you think, gain more empathy, understand other people better. So I love enjoying art so much that I built a website. I've got this website called Hidde's blog, but then I made another one, which is Hidde's log. Just remove the B. And what I do there is that I collect the art that I've enjoyed for myself to look at, basically. So I basically put all the books that I've been reading online so that I can have the data for myself. I do the same with music that I see. So when I see stuff live, I'll upload some pictures, I'll put a rating out there. I'm not an art critic, so these ratings are purely vibe-based. Like, if I had a headache that evening, it will get a low rating. This is just for myself. So I want to give you that as a takeaway too. Enjoy art. Make art, enjoy art. Do those things more than playing with those computers, please. And with that, I want to thank you very much. And the slides are online on this URL. Thank you.